Coming up on More Than Before.
Today may have been a crappy day. Today, you may have stepped in it, yogurt hit the fan, you're just not having a good day. Just didn't make it to the bathroom in time. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But tomorrow's always a better day.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We have such a great and fun guest today. You guys are going to love him as much as I do. He is a leadership development consultant, a speaker, a coach. He's a husband, father, grandfather, and I'm pretty sure he's got a master's degree in dad jokes or puns of some kind. We have such a fun amount of time every single time that we are in the same room, and I know that you guys are going to learn so much from him. You're going to have some great laughter in your day today just because he's joining us. I'm excited to dive into his story. I know you guys are going to love him. Jack Klemeyer, how are you today? So great to have you on the show.
Nathan, thank you so much, man. It's great to be here. It's just, I've been watching these videos and I'm like, oh, someday he'll ask. And then by golly, he did. So it's been cool.
It's kind of like prom, right? I hope he asks me. I hope he asks me.
Right. I got my chiffon dress already and I'm good to go.
You know, it's funny because one of my most fond memories that I have with you is we were at a conference. We were actually walking past one another. And I was like, oh, Jack, we haven't even gotten a selfie together. We got to get a selfie. I don't know if you remember this.
I do.
But I wrapped my arm around you, but you were facing the opposite direction. And you pulled out your phone and I pulled out my phone. And we both took selfies. And we both have selfies of each other's backside.
That's right. That's right.
And it is by far one of my favorite memories to think about because of how much joy and laughter you bring to life.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I don't know any other way to be. I just, it doesn't work too good at sometimes family events or church or funerals, but other than that, it works out pretty good. But I always learned that, you know, if I'm laughing, people are having fun. And if they're having fun, they're learning.
You know, there's so many places that I think that we could all use a little bit more laughter in life. You know, it's funny because as you say, all those different places that you use laughter might get you in trouble. I definitely remember it wasn't too long ago that I was actually in a court of law. I was being selected for a jury panel, and the judge asked me, what is the person in your household, my wife, what does she do for work? And I said, she's a drug dealer. And complete silence in the court. I said, oh, sorry, she's a pharmacist.
Nice.
And not a single person laughed in that room. I was very disappointed, but I ended up, for some reason, I got selected for jury duty. They thought I would be a great addition, the drug dealer's husband. And the first thing that someone did was they walked up to me and the gal said, oh, are you the guy that made that joke about the drug dealing? And I was like, I was. And she said, I laughed so hard inside. I used to be a pharmacist myself.
Oh my gosh.
And laughter brings us together. Laughter really does connect us. I'm curious a lot about your story, how you got to this place of where you are today. But before we kind of dive into that, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jack. Where are you from? What do you like to do with your life? What are you doing with your life right now, Jack?
Yeah, well, the witness protection program prevents me from disclosing all that. No. So, so I'm Indiana born, been in Indiana my whole life, lived all over Indiana, but I've been in Indiana and Southwest Indiana. We now live in Central Indiana and married to Kathy, been married for going on this year will be 24 years. We got married on April Fool's Day. And well, we got married on April 1st, right? And everybody was like, that's April Fool's Day. And we were like, are you serious? Like, we didn't know that. Come on. So anyway, we had fun with that. And then Kathy said, just in passing one time, she goes, yeah, we're just two fools in love. And I'm like, we're gonna stick with that. So
I hope that's on your mantle. Two fools in love.
I'm gonna make a note of that.
Two fools in love, April 1st.
Yeah.
There's something so magical about that though, because of who you are, because of who your wife is.
Yeah. Yeah. We have fun with it. And there's always laughter in our house. I think I got that from my mom and dad. Being an only child, I wasn't the favorite child, which I can't figure out how that happened. But anyway, it's just always been fun to find the good in it, find what's fun in it.
Have you always been like that? I mean, for those of you that you can already tell that Jack is just a ball of fun to be around. He's very childlike. I said childlike, not childish. There's a difference between the two, but you are childlike. You are fun. You're playful, and you've ever since I've known you've always kind of been this way. Were you like that as a kid? What were you like as a kid growing up?
Yeah, they set me in the back of in grade school in the back of the room facing the wall, so I didn't distract everybody, right? Because I was always had a knack for that. When I studied neurolinguistics, which was kind of my discipline, after I went into a leadership position, and I asked a coach I had at the time, I said, how do I get good at working with these folks that I don't have any position power over? He said, you got to learn NLP. I'm like, what's that? Neuro linguistic program. So I spent about 7 years studying that. And one of the most fascinating sessions was a session on modeling, not like modeling for J.C. Penney, but modeling like how does somebody do something really well, and how do you elicit that from them and then teach it to others? And there were 4 of us in the class. It was about 35 people. There were 4 of us that they thought had a good sense of humor. Like we knew timing, we knew when to say something, what to say, that we could just bust the class up laughing. And so they put each of us in a corner, and they elicited from us, what's our strategy for doing that? How do we know when, and what do we know what to say? And it was really cool. But then they took the graphic that they created, was called an experiential array. And they put that up on the wall, and there's Melissa's, and there's Gail's, and there's mine, and whoever the other person was, I can't remember. They were almost identical. And it was, I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. There's a pattern to that, right? So you can get, when somebody's really good at something, you can elicit from them how they think about what they do, which is more important actually than what they do. And then teach that to other people.
Yeah.
And that was just an amazing, so actually that was a case study that's written up in this book on modeling for practitioners of neurolinguistics. So I got that going for me.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So were you a good student in school?
No.
Or were you were a class clown, weren't you?
Well, yeah, I mean So I used that so I wouldn't, they wouldn't flunk me. I never got an F. I did drop a few classes in college, but I never got an F, I'm proud to say, for a class grade. And I got Fs on tests and stuff like that. But I wasn't a good student until I found something that I loved. And if you think about Patrick Lencioni's work or Marcus Buckingham, like when I got into physics, I loved physics, and I was a straight A student in physics. Hated chemistry. I sucked in chemistry. I remember one time we were taking a test, and my girlfriend was sitting right in front of me, right in the school. And I said, Ann, what's the answer to number 7? And it was what does PB stand for? And she kept tapping her pencil. And I go, quit tapping your pencil and tell me what PB stands for. So after the class, she goes, it's lead, you dummy, So PB stood for lead. And she was trying to tell me by tapping her pencil. I was too dumb to even get that. So
I was thinking peanut butter, but that was just...
No, chemical sign PB stands for lead. So I mean, 50 years later, I still know that. So I guess that worked. But now, yeah, I kind of cut up in class. In some classes, I just would, not participate. But
well, I find that kind of interesting, especially, with your mom's background in education. I think there's something inside of our parents that want us to at least absorb a little bit of who they are, right? Your mom was a principal, but she was also an elementary teacher, right?
Right.
And so
right.
It's kind of funny because you can definitely hear that in the way that you talk about things. You're so relatable. Your stories are relatable. I think we can all kind of see ourselves in those moments. But then on the other side of things, your dad was an entrepreneur.
Right.
Did you, because you're an entrepreneur now, you do your own thing. You're running by the seat of your pants. Was that a characteristic that you picked up from your father along the way? Did you always know you wanted to kind of do your own thing, or where did that come about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I left college, I was going to sell vitamins and be a millionaire, but I was afraid to make calls, so that didn't go very well. Then I went in, actually I was working for a collections company, and I was pretty good at it. I hated making the calls, but I remember one day I had this guy, he had like 2 payments left on his loan, and I refinanced his loan this was back in the early 80s, refinanced his loan for like 20 years at like 28% interest. And I just felt sick at my stomach. I'm like, I just messed this guy over. And the regional manager came in and congratulated me. And I'm like, yeah, I just can't do this. So I would, at lunchtime, I would go down to the local computer store. There was a computer land, and I would just, hang around in there. And one day I was in there, and some guy started asking me questions, and I started answering them. And so I sold him a computer. I wasn't even working there. And there was this guy sitting over on the side just watching. And he did one of these, and I'm like, oh. dang, I'm in trouble, right? So I walk over there. He goes, "What's your name?" And I said, "I'm Jack." And he goes, "My name's Alan. I own this place, and you're selling more than my salespeople do. So you want a job?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I sold computers and did really well with that, and then went in to be an insurance agent on my own. So I love that transference of enthusiasm, that transference of knowledge. I think it's I played with my mind in that because I would watch people walk in. There's a retail location where we were selling computers, and I would I wonder if I believe this person's going to buy, if they'll buy. So I would talk to my counterparts. Okay, guys, this person, they're going to buy. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And then they would. And then I'd see somebody walk out, yeah, there's no way they're going to buy. And then they would. And we started keeping track of that. And it was kind of like, wow, how I approached the customer, the prospect, was how the sale turned out. And so I set sales records there, a couple different sales records, did really well with that. I just enjoyed it. I remember I was teaching a class because I loved teaching. I didn't know I did, but I was teaching. There's 35 people in this class, and I had sold every one of them their computer. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is cool. How cool is this, right? So, so I think the entrepreneur bug just came from, I don't know if it's entrepreneur or selling. I'm not sure, but sometimes I have a hard time selling, but just because I don't like making calls.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that you bring up that how you approached people would determine whether or not they would buy or sell. And I think that's actually a lot to do with life, right? How you approach life is what you're going to get. Right. And there are a lot of negative Nellies out there that go out and the sky is going to fall and everything's horrible. And you look at their life and guess what? Their life is horrible.
Yeah.
And it's literally their own choosing to live this way, to believe this way. And truly the mind is powerful. Not that it necessarily creates it, but it looks for opportunities to solidify what it is that you believe.
Absolutely.
What were some of the things early on that you believed that maybe didn't serve you as you were growing up that later on in life you go, man, maybe I would have been a little bit further if I had switched that belief around?
Yeah, that I was dead sexy. That didn't work.
And I like the way you said it, dead sexy.
Dead sexy, baby. I don't know. I figured that I could. I love John Maxwell's philosophy when he says, "I know the rules. What's the fine?" That's kind of been a philosophy of mine. Is that I look for a way to get it done instead of the reasons why it can't get done. But I don't know. I'm trying to think. Is there something that my thought process that didn't serve me? Maybe management of money that didn't. I mean, I'm not that good at that, and I should be better at that. And so I think that's probably one where I thought it'll be all right. I'll be okay. And I'm okay. But I mean, I should have saved and invested more than what I did. That's probably the main one.
Yeah. I kind of feel like we all feel that way. Even myself, I know I'm still young, but I look back and I'm like, man, if I had at least been doing things differently, in the economy that we're in right now, I always tell my wife, I was like, man, 10 years ago, we should have bought a house when we said we were going to buy a house. And we just didn't, because there were no houses back then. Well, guess what? There's no houses now. So it's funny though, because so often in life, we kind of step into shoes that we're not ready for. And the more that we step into those shoes, we grow into those shoes. I love the odd jobs that people worked when they were younger. One of the really horrible, lovely odd jobs that I worked for Dairy Gold for a small season. It was literally a day. I walked on site and I emptied cartons of milk back into these huge vats so they could repasteurize them. I don't know if they still do this or not. It was not a great day of work. Wow. I'm curious for you. Do you remember like any odd jobs that you had growing up that maybe spark inspiration for, I was doing that back then and it's kind of actually helped me today with what I'm doing?
Yeah. I think one of my favorite jobs, Nathan, was I was a hardware clerk. I worked in a hardware store and I loved that job because I loved just people to ask where something is. My dad, built houses, remodeled houses. So we always had hardware stuff around the house. And I was able to, this will do this and this will do that. I was able to explain to people, providing solutions for people. But I loved that job. And I kidded a few years ago. I said to Kathy, I think I just want to go work at the hardware store. I just would love that because people come in, they're lost. They don't know what they need, and you just help them find a solution. So I love that. I did construction one year, go out over the summers, high school. That was fun. I worked for my dad, which was, you never work for your dad, but it was just,
Cheap labor.
yeah, cheap labor. Well, yeah, cheap labor. And then also just hard driving. We tore down barns. So this was back in the 70s. That's how old I am. We were tearing down barns. Somebody was going to remodel their inside their house with barn wood. And so we had to go salvage the wood off barns. We couldn't break it off. We had to gently take it off.
Yeah, because you had to reuse it.
Yeah,
and all the nails too, right?
Right. Yeah, and that was a huge experience, just because, just my friend, we pulled off these two beams, and where the beams came apart, it was like brand new wood, and so my friend's an artist, so he goes, let's get your dad. So he wrote A. Lincoln and put like 1858 on it. So when Dad came to check on us, because he'd just drop us off, we were way out in the boonies. And we're like, Dad, come look at this, And so we're like, look what we found. And my dad's like, oh my God, is that, we had him for a second. And then he's like, you sons of, so, but that was a good one. That was a fun one. But those were ones, just working with people. I love that.
I love that, and kind of going back to with what you were just talking, like, I love to hear that, like, you guys kind of had this hard work ethic that you guys have always had. From your father to you, even your kids nowadays, they're hard workers also. And it's kind of that passing of lineage. I want to talk about the comfort zone.
Yeah.
So many people love to stay in the comfort zone and they don't want to leave. Usually what happens is something comes up in their life that forces them to leave.
Yeah.
And earlier in your life, you actually had that happen to you, where you were shown the door. You were working hard, and you were shown the door to leave. And in that moment, there's always that piece of, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? But then there's also the opportunity that comes with that.
Yeah.
What was the closing of that door, and how did that open up a new door of opportunity for you to step into?
Yeah, so I was with an insurance company, and I was, I'd been there for 13 years, I guess. And so I'd been in agency. I'd had my own agency for a few years, then went into leadership and did really well with that. And then they brought me into the executive office in the state of Indiana, and I did a big software rollout, which our area was doing really well with acceptance and making the sale on that to agents. But the bite was too big. It was too much technology all at once for the technology that we had from where we were. And so then one day, after they spent $500 million, $500 million on it, they pulled the plug. And so then they said, I was like, wait a minute, I don't have a job. And then they said, well, we want you to take over the agency recruiting piece. And so I did that and did really well there. And then there was a big reorg where they combined states and combined stuff, and they put me back out in the field, which was fine. But I went with a boss that I just couldn't please. And the harder I tried to please, there would be regional meetings that he would go to, and he would take some of the ideas that I generated, some of the processes that I created. He would present them as his own. Matter of fact, one of my former bosses called me and said, he's here doing that? And I'm like, nah, it's whatever. And I was thinking, I'm a team player. I'll do that. And it turned out that he was just out for him. And I made mistakes. I made tons of mistakes. And then I ended up getting fired. I mean, actually fired, walked out the door. Right. So I ended up getting fired. And that was a devastating blow. And luckily an old mentor, an old insurance friend, my boss's boss from the insurance, he was doing some training. He said, come work with me. And so we moved to this little town where I'm now, didn't know anybody in the town. We moved here, bought a house. I don't know how we bought a house. I didn't have a job, right? So this might've been back before the housing bubble. It was in 2003. So, but we kept our house, and I don't know how it all worked out. It just did. And that was a big one. That was a big one. So then I started doing, because I just replicated the work I was doing inside the company when I was at my best. And that's where I found myself in where I could do good, so that's what I did.
I love that. And you have this desire inside of you to add value to others, to help others. solving problems. You've said that already a number of times.
Yeah.
Has that been something that you knew you were good at? You always knew you were a good problem solver, or did that come later on in life where you started to put the pieces together to go, actually, I really like solving problems. I like figuring things out and tinkering with things until they actually work.
Might have been just now, as a matter of fact. Because I always had a lot of problems. I mean, I always created a lot of problems just because sometimes I leave a pretty big wake by clowning around or doing something goofy, right? And so in doing that, I don't know if I thought about it in terms of being a problem solver, a solution provider. I don't think I ever thought about it in those terms. Just me being me. But when you think about it, seriously, that's kind of like, yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, who are some of your inspiration? Like, who was some of your inspiration when it comes to comedy, to levity? Because I find, like, for myself, I know that there are specific comedians that I grew up listening to, emulating to some extent, and that levity, that timing that you were even talking about earlier comes from studying people. I didn't know at the time that I was studying them, but I was studying their craft, studying how they showed up. Who were some of your early inspirations when it came to observing comedy and timing and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I don't know that I realized that, just like you, that I was studying it, but like the Andy Griffith show, that it was always funny. Just that play between Andy and Barney, that was always neat. Red Skelton, who's brilliant at improv, Harvey Korman and Tim Conway, just on the Carol Burnett show. Those were some amazing timing comedians. I don't know if it's any comedy people per se. Jonathan Winters, I liked, just, and Steve Martin some. I didn't really like the crassness of some of those guys. I mean, you'd see them and they'd be really funny, and then you'd go see them. I don't think I've ever gone to see a comedian or a big name comedian. Just never have. It's just, and I don't know. I've tried to figure out, is it, looking at my disc profile, my Enneagram, my Myers-Briggs, like, what's that combination that gives me that ability to do that? And I don't know that I've realized what it is, but it's a gift. It can also be a curse if used wrong, right? So
yeah. Well, I think it's kind of the entertainer, right? Like,
yeah,
there are people that we meet in our life that we can look across the table from, or the screen from nowadays. But you look across and you say, "You're like me." Like, when I look at Jack, I say, "You're like me," because we both we're kind of we're funny. We like to roll with the punches. We like to make a joke. I'm sure that if you're anything like me, I make the joke too often that gets me in trouble.
yeah.
But there's something to be said about the connector. And there are people that are playful. I would almost call them entertainers, not in the negative sense, because I feel like we live in a world of entertainers where people are trying to put on a facade. Whereas there's an entertainer where I look at you and I look at myself and I say, I want to entertain people, to make them laugh, to enjoy the moment that they're in.
Yes.
How important has that been for you in your life to
big time
craft that kind of experience for other people to make it memorable?
Well, yeah. Huge, because I thought about, labeling what I do as edutainment, right? So it's because I'm educating you, but I'm entertaining you, but I don't want to take away from it. But I do add that humor in there where I can. But if you think about it, where I was, I guess my gift has always been to gather people of very diverse backgrounds. When I was in high school, we had a party, a senior party at our house. We had 300 people there, if you can imagine, 300 people. And, the biker guys were there and the preppy guys were there. And and everybody was getting along. There was until somebody threw a 3-pound block of cheese through a car window and the police came. Other than that, but it was, it's just, and so those parties were like, so I had several, maybe a half dozen of those. Those parties became legendary. Everybody was there and everybody got along there. And I've always had that gift of that ability to bring people together to work on something or to have a conversation or to network. I love connecting people. I had a networking breakfast that I started a few years back that ran for 5 years. And then COVID came, of course, the restaurant went out of business and I never started it back up. But
Mm.
For 5 years, we had breakfast every other Friday morning. And there'd be sometimes me and one other person, and most times 20 people would be there,
Wow.
and people started inviting other people, and it just became kind of a thing, and it was kind of neat. And I love doing that galvanizing people, right? Getting them together. I love doing that.
And I love that too, especially in a world that is so polarizing that we live in today. We need more people that can bring others together from different backgrounds, from different belief systems, all those kinds of things. And it doesn't matter necessarily that everyone has to believe the same thing, but
No,
there is something to being willing to be in a room, to listen to what other people have to say, to love the person, not necessarily love what they do. And that's one of the things that I think that I can resonate with kind of who you are and how you show up. What have been those moments where you realized that you truly could create community around you? Because there's a lot of people today that we select our community because people are like us. I think you're very different in the fact that you actually draw people from all walks of life towards you. Was there a moment in your life where you realized that you actually were able to draw people from different life perspective to truly draw them in to living differently?
yeah, I think so. Well, I think those parties after high school, those were a big thing. Our house was always the gathering house. And it may have been that we had our fridge in the basement that was always full of beer. I don't know. That could be part of it. But we didn't abuse it that much, right? But people would, like, I went over to my friend's house maybe, I don't know, a couple dozen times, but they were at my house all the time. And there would be more than just one or two. There'd be 6 to 10 people there just on a Friday night or a Saturday night, watching Saturday Night Live or something. And so I think from that, I realized it, but I didn't understand what to do with it. In the business world now, I look for connections. I sat down with a young lady at the Maxwell conference just last couple weeks ago, and she has a daycare, and I have a friend who's buying daycares. And I said, hey, maybe. And so I talked to my friend. She said, yeah, connect me. So, just stuff like that. I love doing that kind of stuff.
Mm.
I love looking at, like, where do the prospects nest? Where do they hang out? I call it nesting. So like when I was in the insurance business, I wasn't good at consistency. And so to get realtors to work with an agent, you had to be consistent. And there was an agent in the community that had been there for a long time, and he was really good. Great marketer. I learned a ton from him. But I realized I could go after high-end apartments and get them before he got them. And so that's what I did. And then we had a machine going, and it worked out really well.
Mm. Now, another aspect of your life that I think is really important to kind of expand upon is your faith. Faith is a huge cornerstone. And I would almost say that your faith speaks louder than words. That the way that you show up in a room, that you come into a room, I've always kind of felt this peace around you where people are just welcomed in.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Thanks.
I'm curious from your perspective, how has faith played a huge part in your life, and how has that opened up doors as you've grown older?
Yeah, I don't know that it's opened up doors, but it's played a big part. I mean, you go through your 20s and 30s, there's always some confusion there. Growing up Catholic, I always kid when I go to the Maxwell conference, I'm the token Catholic. There's not that many Catholics in the group. There may be, out of 51,000, there might be 9 of us, maybe 10. I don't know. There could be. That's just been different. The church a matter of fact, when Kathy and I moved here, she wasn't Catholic. She converted to Catholicism. And the church we went to, we just felt at home, and it's been our church ever since. And they've rebuilt and everything. And I feel connected at that church. It's just neat. I'm a Eucharistic minister, give out communion, and want to do more there, but have been scared, reticent to, how do I approach that? How do I say that? Because faith is, I don't want to abuse that, and I wouldn't be, I don't think. But I also think that there's opportunity there where I can bring value.
Mm. How does your faith add value to you?
Oh man, well, it's the strength. I mean, I think back about, gosh, what I'm not a holy roller, if you will. I'm not in that realm by any means, for a lot of reasons. But I mean, we go to mass, we practice the faith, and I think it gives me strength. I know it gives Kathy strength, and seeing her strength in it gives me strength. She does a daily devotional and stuff. I don't do that. My style, my makeup is hard. I prevent myself from making systems to work. So I have to overcome that some way. So consistency sometimes is a challenge for me. Well, it's always been a challenge. But I think faith is just something that I draw on. My dad, in our family, my grandmother was Catholic. My dad was Catholic, and I am. And our kids don't practice, although they do go occasionally to mass up at school at Ball State. And so I don't want to pressure them, but I want them to know that there's a loving God that's there that believes in them for who they are, whoever they are. Right. So it's just, I think it's that acceptance piece and I think I've gotten closer to God in the Maxwell world too, just reflecting back about how that's centered me more than ever. I mean, that just hanging around John, hearing that message, hanging around you, hanging around people that of the tribe, if you will, how that just, they're solid people. And there's some wackadoodles, but everybody's got wackadoodles, right? So
it's true. We got to get them back in the cage though.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, what I love so much about who you are is you truly do stand out. You stand out in a crowd. There's kind of an identity piece that I find with you that you're solid. There's something about you that's truly solid. And I'm curious because so much of what I like to focus on this podcast is people's identity, who they were, who they have become. And one of the things I think that's fascinating about you is you've experienced pressure in your life. Like we all experience pressure to not stand out in the world, to conform. We should all conform and be like one another, be one other person in the crowd. And I think you've actually been pretty intentional to make sure that you do stand out, that you are your own person. Yeah. I'm curious, what difficulties have you experienced in life because you chose not to conform to everyone else? And what kind of, what about those experiences embolden you to have a greater voice for other people?
Yeah, well, I thought of one and then it left me. When you get old, you start to forget things. But for example, I remember being in Muncie. There was something going on in Muncie, my first wife. And there was a big long line at this restaurant bar place. And I remember looking over at the roast beef place right across the street, and there wasn't anybody in there, but the parking lot was full. And I'm like, yeah, that's where they parked. So I excused myself and I went up and grabbed the payphone that was in the left. This is a payphone, no cell phones back then. Called the manager of that restaurant we were in line for. And I said, yeah, this is Bob. I'm the manager over here at the roast beef place. And if these cars don't move, I'm going to have them towed. You got 30 minutes. And so they stopped the band. They turned the lights up. They made an announcement. Everybody if you're parked in the parking lot, go move your cars. Like 40 people came out of there. And so I didn't have to buy a drink the whole night. I didn't have to buy dinner. Everybody around me bought, they're like, oh, that's awesome. Right. But I see opportunities like that, I'm like that. To me, that just, why are we not doing that? Why don't we make that happen? And, I think that's where it's served me in that kind of an idea. Where it hasn't served me, I guess sometimes it's just, sometimes I break the rules that I shouldn't break. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but, but it's just, I'm not a conformist. I try to act like one. So I look pretty calm on the outside, but I'm always looking for an angle, not to cheat anybody, not to lessen anybody. And then I think, just to think about, everybody's carrying a load. Everybody's carrying something. And it could be bills. It could be relationship. It could be challenges with their family. And so we just need to extend a little grace to people because they're carrying something. And if we can help them through that day, then I think about Ben Franklin's, his daily thing, that what good will I find today? At the end of the day, what good did I find today? I think about that a lot. It's like, what good will I find today? Well, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for, who's going to cut me off in traffic today. I'm not looking for that. People do. And I just, and one of my early mentors, virtual, I guess, was Jim Rohn, not the sports guy, Rhon. And I just got to see him 2 or 3 times, talk to him a bunch. He just never worked for him or anything, but just his philosophy just resonated with me all the way to my core. So that's kind of where I come from, is that spot.
I've heard from comedians, not necessarily that you're a comedian, but I do find that people who have a lot of levity, have a lot of comedy, they carry a lot of weight. And that weight has actually, they take it off, comedians, they take it off by finding the levity, even in the darkest of places.
Yeah.
And I'm curious for you, what have been some of those dark things that you've had to put down, and what has helped you to be able to put those things down in your own life?
We're going to go deep here, kids. Might want to freshen up your drink. Well, one of the things that I had to deal with as a business person is people would introduce me. You need to meet my friend Jack. He's really funny and he wears red socks. He can help you with your business. Doesn't exactly set you up for success, right? Jack can help you with your team. He's really funny. It doesn't help that. So that was a little thing. But I mean, I suffer from depression. I mean, there were times a few years ago that I couldn't basically get out of bed. You just would struggle with that, and still do sometimes. I think it's in the call reluctance. Sometimes I do that. I'm always trying to figure out who is Jack. I write, I take assessments, I look, and I take that. I did a training for a friend of mine is a manager of a pharmaceutical company, and it was on the 15 laws. We did the first couple of laws, and he goes, "Did you realize the first 3 laws of 15 laws of growth spell I am?" And I'm like, "No." He goes, "Yeah, intentionality. There's intentionality. Then there's A is awareness, and then law of the mirror." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's huge." Right. So I think about those 3 laws all the time. Intentionality, awareness. Am I aware of what I'm doing? My favorite quote, I should have said it earlier, but from Paul Martinelli taught it to me, but is that quote from Carl Jung: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life and you'll call it fate." And I'm always looking at that to say, okay, what am I missing? What am I not? And I've been at, like, I was doing a training one time, Nathan. I was training this big company on, we were talking about flexibility. And this lady's like, "You don't need flexibility." I'm like, "Yeah, you really do." Because well, it turns out she was the administrative assistant of the chairman of the board or something. Well, I was being inflexible in listening to her. So I was asked never to come back, right? You can't come back. And I'm like, really? Okay. Then I'm thinking, okay, well, when you know something to be true, where does that line? I don't know. That still bothers me, right? It's like, was I being flexible or was I teaching? Can you teach and be flexible? Maybe I should have tried something different. I don't know. It's just a very interesting day that I got asked to never come back. So,
well, it's interesting.
Happened once.
It's interesting that you kind of bring up that teaching. Can you be flexible and teach? And
well, you have to be flexible and teach, but I mean, to one point, right? So
yeah, to one point,
especially about flexibility.
But it kind of reminds me of like a razor's edge. Like if you want to sharpen an edge, if you want to get an edge on the competition, we've all heard that before. Right. If you want to sharpen your skill to become better, you need a hard surface to sharpen against.
Yeah, that's true.
The softer the surface is, the less likely that you're actually going to be more effective. In fact, it's funny because you bring up Paul Martinelli. Paul Martinelli was one of those people. The first time I ever heard him on stage, he kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, I don't know if I like this guy.
Yeah.
And he turned out to be one of the most influential mentors in my life because of his ability to just cut straight to the point.
Yeah.
To be, and there is something to be said with, some tact and not necessarily hitting everything with a hammer. But I will say, the people who I have loved most in my life were those people that were a hard surface that sharpened me to become better. Something else that you said that was interesting too about that piece of, like, sometimes I think we all kind of get in that place where we wake up in the morning and we say, I just don't know if I want to get out of bed. What if I do the wrong thing? What am I supposed to do next? And it kind of reminded me of this thing that I heard recently, that God has ordained every single breath that you will ever breathe. I don't know what it is about that statement, but something about that statement just really speaks to me in moving forward, especially in moments of unsureness. Of I'm not sure what's going to happen if I take a step forward. You know what's really awesome is if you believe in God and you believe that God has ordained every single breath in your lungs, it doesn't matter what's going to happen next. He's already ordained it. He already knows how many breaths that you're going to have in your life. And all you have to do is show up. Show up as who you were created to be.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as you show up today, what have been some of the key moments that you've realized that you truly are operating as who you were meant to be?
Oh, I'm having fun. That's one. I mean, I'm enjoying it. It's not nearly as stressful as it used to be. And my favorite group is a group called Squeeze. You may have not heard of them. They're an English group, but they had a song that had a line in it back in the 80s that said, "I'm picking up the pieces. Maybe they'll fit someday." And that's kind of been my moniker, I guess, is that, okay, I learned a little bit here. I learned a little bit there. I picked this up from Nathan. I picked this up there. I remember I was trying to tie my bow tie, and you helped me tie it because I'd forgotten how to tie it. It'd been so long since I'd tied a bow tie. But I took them to IMC because you had a bow tie, and but there's little things, right? We are the culmination of the people we've hung around with. But I think it's a mosaic of a lot of different, things that didn't work, things that did work. But right now, where I am in life is that I feel pretty good with it, and I know there's a lot more to do.
What do you feel like your mission is, right? Like we all have different statements, different purposes at different points in our life. When we're younger, it's kind of to build and to really find ourselves, to sharpen the edge, kind of what we were talking about before. And then as you progress in the years, you start to kind of become more solid and understanding of who you are. And then you kind of set your nose in a direction and you kind of move in that direction. I'm curious for you, with your kids, with your grandkids that you have, what is the thing that drives you forward? What is that purpose that moves you in a direction that you say, today was a good day because I lived that purpose?
Yeah. So there's a funeral and a ghost, I think. So my grandfather, my namesake, John Lewis Klemeyer Sr., Jack Klemeyer, he died when I was 4 years old, so I barely knew him. What I remember most about him is I pissed him off because I did a somersault and had sand in my pockets. But
on the carpet too, right?
Yeah, it was. It was on a rug. Yeah, I got in trouble for it. But everybody that talked about him was amazing. And it was one of the biggest funerals they ever had in a little small town I grew up in. And I have a picture somewhere around here that's at his gravesite, all the flowers that were there. I mean, they were just huge flowers. And so part of me aspires to leave that kind of an image, I guess, or that kind of to have people that think of me enough to send flowers, right? This day and age, they probably don't do that. They send a Snapchat or something. Maybe there's a big collection of Snapchat somewhere. That's one. His ghost, because he only lived to be 60. He was 60 years old when he died. And then my dad, there was a family feud over a business, and the business went out of business. Dad couldn't manage it. He was more of a creative like me and not as much of a business person, and didn't know how or where to ask for help. And that business went out of business. It was a third generation business, been around for 50 years at the time. So that kind of thing is, I guess, weighs on me sometimes. Just how do I make good? How do I make the name good? Like when I was brought up, that there were so many aunts and uncles and cousins. I mean, I went to a lot of funerals before I was 10 because all those old people died, but by their own hand. I mean, that God took them. I didn't do anything with, but just I had a lot more connection to family, I think, than what my kids do, because we live in this town. There's nobody here. We moved my mom in with us 5 years ago. She's 92. She'll be 93 in May. She wouldn't have made it. She lived in the old family house, and just it just wouldn't have worked out.
I love that you moved your mother back in with you. There's so many stories that we hear of people putting their parents in an assisted living kind of place. And if you're in that category, there's no judgment here when I'm saying this.
No.
But there is a huge sacrifice that comes in to making that kind of decision. But I think with that sacrifice comes an immense reward. What are some of the rewards that you have gained from having your mother back in your house with you? But also, what are some of the lessons that you learn now that maybe you would not have received as clearly when you were younger?
Well, first of all, if the audience is a praying audience, pray for my wife, Kathy, because she agreed to it. I don't think Mom says to her sometimes, you didn't think I'd live this long, did you? But Mom's a different personality style. She's a high D. So she wants to be in control. She wants to know what's going on, 2 weeks from now. She doesn't. So we don't tell her stuff until it's right up on the minute, or a couple of days ahead of time, because we don't want to answer 30 questions. She's right-minded. She has her faculties. Matter of fact, we were arguing about where something was at holiday time, Christmas time. Where was a certain thing we set out? And Kathy and I were saying it was on this table. And Mom's like, no, it was over there. It was over on that spot. And we're like, no, it wasn't. So we got a picture out. She was right. She remembers better than we do actually on things. So, but I think what the neat thing is just to ask her questions. She had maybe a dozen high school friends and stuff when she first moved in. That's whittled down to about 3 now. The rest of them have died off. That's kind of sad. She calls. She loves calling people. The kids FaceTime her. She can do FaceTime. So that's cool. That's neat. I think the wisdom piece that hopefully Kathy will get from that. Our plan was that we knew Kathy's dad was going to die. He had cancer. And our plan was that we'd move her mom in with us. And then her mom died unexpectedly through a medical procedure that went wrong.
Mm.
And so she lost both her parents within 4 months of each other. And then my dad had already passed. And then anyway, so I think just the asking questions like, what was this or what was that? And she can't remember. So she'll try to call somebody that was that might remember. And we're always talking. I love genealogy. I never did. My dad was big into it. I tried to get into it more and more. I wish I would have been more alert when he was doing it so I could ask more questions. But just asking questions about that has been good. And just family stuff, tradition has been really big to me. Mm-hmm. And family, every night we eat together at 5:00. We normally sit down to eat together. And at 1:15, she's downstairs with her glass of Merlot, ready for dinner. You can bet right now she's at the head of the table wondering, where's Jack? But that's just the way it is. If I'm out of town, they eat it, we just eat at 5:00. That's just our plan. That's what we do.
I love so many of the things that you've said, getting to know you a little bit more over this. I want to ask you one more question. And I think it's a big question because I keep meeting a lot of people that are kind of going through this right now. And that is this perspective of going from parent to grandparent. There's a difference between you raising your kids and having the opportunity to speak into your grandkids, right? Because in one sense, you're the disciplinarian, you're correcting them, you're trying to mold them into creatures that the world will not send to the stake. On the other side, you have these small children that you get to just pour love and encourage, and you can speak lessons into it. And I think they're more receptive in that way. I'm curious for you, what has been one of the greatest joys of being a grandparent thus far in your life?
Well, you think of it this way. It's kind of like you find china and a paper cup. Like grandkids are like a paper cup. When you're done with it, you just toss it away, right? And find china, you got to wash, you got to scrub. You can't put it in the dishwasher. You got to be careful with that. That's what your children are like. And so our daughter, Melissa, with my first marriage, she lives in St. Louis, which is 5 hours from here. So we don't get to see them that much. We see them on FaceTime and stuff like that. So I keep telling Kathy I'm going to teach them certain things. And Kathy's like, no, you're not. You're not teaching them that. So there's some things that I got to teach them before they go. But so I haven't had that much during the pandemic and stuff. When they were first born, they were paranoid about the pandemic. They wouldn't let anybody get near their kids. They just had another one 6 months ago. So So I haven't really had that opportunity to really pour into them that much. We get together a couple times a year, 3 times a year maybe, and sadly we just haven't had that much opportunity to get together. So I've missed that.
If there was one message that you could leave people that are listening, what would you want them to know about who they were created to be and how they should live differently today?
Yeah, I love how this therapy session has been really good, doctor. My dad would tell me, when he'd come in and tell me he loved me, tell me good night, he would stand in the doorway, and I could see his silhouette there. And he'd say, just remember, Jack, tomorrow's always a better day. And I didn't realize all the weight he had on him of the business going out, family pressures and all that stuff. And I think that's one thing I would leave you with is tomorrow's always a better day. Like today may have been a crappy day. Today you may have stepped in it, yogurt hit the fan. You're just not having a good day, right? You just didn't make it to the bathroom in time, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But tomorrow's always a better day. And so just, okay, what'd you learn from today? I think I would add that piece. What can I take into tomorrow that'll help me make it a better day? And kind of going back to what you said, God's already ordained your breath, right? So you just got to show up. That's huge. And I think be careful what you ask for because it will show up. So if you're worried about lack, you'll get more lack. If you're worried about abundance, you'll get more abundance. So I used to worry about having a small bank account. And I always had a small bank account. And then when I stopped worrying about it, started focusing on revenue streams and how can I be fully me, things changed. And it was the whole change was here with God's help. It wasn't anything structurally that I did differently. It was a thinking difference. It was a confidence thing, is to realize. I think the other thing too, the best advice I ever got was from a coach that I was preparing for a training session and I was going over and over and over my notes. And I used to be a way over preparer. And my coach, his name was Jack too. And he said, what you got to do is just tell yourself you got it. Just trust yourself. And so I do that to this day. I just say before I go on, okay, I got this. I got this. And I just trust myself. I just absolutely trust myself. And I know with God's help, it'll be okay. And I know I've got a ton of support. One thing's for sure, if you ever cross me, I don't care, but Kathy will hunt you down and chop you up. She is wicked. So she protects me like a rat terrier. So that's always good. But I think that's just it. Tomorrow's always a better day. Show up and see what you find. Look for the treasure.
I love that.
Look at Oak Island. Oak Island's been going on for 12 years. They still haven't found anything, but by golly, they're out there tomorrow night, every week, digging.
I love that so much. It's not about what you know, but it's about who you know. And who you know is so important. Jack, thank you so much for being on the show. This episode is going to make such a huge difference in someone's life today. To all of you who are watching, listening, share this with a friend. Leave a comment below. Let us know what resonated with you from this episode. And until next time, be more, see more, and experience more than before.